Moving to another region of the world is the European Union, which is made up of 27 countries, showing they are a significant part of our globe. Therefore, it is important to understand how all of these 27 countries are contributing towards climate change as well as towards combating climate change. In December of 2019, the European Union was creating their Green Deal, which was spearheaded by leader von der Leyen just 12 days after he took office. This gives us hope to see how aggressively the European Union's leader is tackling climate change and how seriously he sees it. The goal of the Green Deal is to have a net of zero emissions by 2050, meaning they will be offsetting all of the greenhouse gases released in the atmosphere by then. 1 billion euros have been allocated to this project for the countries hardest hit when reducing emissions. In order to achieve this, they have many smaller goals along the way, including a smaller goal of reducing emissions by 2030, and by June 2021 to have revised all laws to accommodate for greenhouse emissions and more. Furthermore, they have addressed how this will affect different aspects of daily life that will assist them in reaching this goal, such as transportation, land use and forestry, trade, and more. In a survey of Europeans in 2019, it revealed that 93% of Europeans view climate change as a serious problem, and 79% even see climate change as a very serious problem. 92% of Europeans believe their government should be creating policies to act on climate change and agree with the Green Deal. 93% of respondents have even said that they have taken steps themselves to protect the environment. The most common actions were recycling more and decreasing their use of disposable items. While all of these results seem positive, the survey did also reveal some alarming facts. Although all of these citizens seem to be in support of attacking climate change and trying to do their part, they are not doing enough to reach the goals set by the Paris Agreement. The EU and all of its member states must do more in order to achieve the goals set forth in the Paris Agreement and their own goals for 2050 and sooner. Another source confirmed the EU not meeting the Paris Agreement goal of reducing emissions by 1.5 degrees Celsius, disclosing that the EU's global warming has increased just under 3 degrees Celsius, almost double the goal of the Paris Agreement. However, in comparison to some other countries such as Russia and Saudi Arabia, who have increased their global warming by 4 degrees Celsius, they could be doing much worse. The survey released by the EU shows varying levels of compliance and efforts by member states in the climate change fight. The most ambitious countries include Sweden, Portugal, France, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. In contrast, Belgium, Denmark, and Germany don't seem to be as keen on the climate change fight, which is surprising due to their relative wealth. These countries seem to have moved away from their once supportive stance on climate change. Many members, such as Italy, Spain, Austria, and Finland, have made comments in the past addressing combating climate change. However, they have not taken any consistent action on the issue. Finally, some countries in Eastern Europe, particularly Poland and Estonia, seem wholly unmotivated to take any action. Poland has sustained from all talks surrounding the European Union's Green Deal. While there are motivated and encouraging countries that are active in the fight against climate change, they are not strong enough to make up for the entire European Union. They have plenty of potential, however, they need all countries to pull their weight to be a climate change role model. The European Union has analyzed each member state's position on climate change. They have recognized what each member state has done well and given them suggestions to do even better. The European Union is working hard as a whole to combat climate change. However, they need more support from their member states to fully achieve their goals.
While much of the world is making significant progress in terms of recognizing the imminent threat climate change is to all future generations on Earth, there are still several countries who do not seem to be aware of these devastating effects, nor have any distinct plan to help curb their emission amounts. In terms of this podcast, the two nations that I'll be discussing at greater length are Russia and Saudi Arabia. The fight against climate change in many ways boils down to reducing greenhouse gases, which largely comes from burning fossil fuels. However, the extraction and sale of coal, oil, and natural gas are central to Russia's economy, meaning in comparison to other countries, who, for example, may be more reliant on a tourism economy, Russia would require an extremely ambitious retransformation in terms of how they run their economy. Additionally, much like our current situation in the United States, President Vladimir Putin has cast his own doubt on the man-made origins of climate change, speaking at a late 2019 press conference saying, "Nobody knows the origins of global climate change," despite, as we know, overwhelming evidence from scientists worldwide suggesting that this is not true. However, unlike the US, in Russia there is no reliable system of checks and balances, meaning Putin can easily be compared to a dictator, thus further contributing to very little progress being made in Russia's adaptation to using renewable energy. However, with the beginning of 2020, it appears that Russia may slowly be coming around to recognizing the inevitable impact that climate change will end up having on our world, particularly to their country. On January 4th, 2020, the Kremlin published a national plan to slowly adapt both their economy and society to climate change. Based on their federal monitoring reports, the average annual temperature in Russia is rising 2.5 times faster than the global average, which may be in part to both their carbon output and their position in relation to the equator. While the report does include statements including how climate change may have a positive effect on the country, such as an expansion in crop and livestock production and a reduction in energy consumption for heating, the report recognizes that these two factors will undoubtedly be offset by the demand for air conditioning and the further exponential increase in carbon that will come from raising even more livestock. Russia is notoriously known for often being behind in situations where the rest of the world is very advanced, but I personally believe this is a paradigm shift for them and the world as a whole, and we can hope that they will follow through on their commitments to reducing greenhouse gases. Saudi Arabia is very similar to Russia in terms of their lack of involvement to help combat the effects of climate change. In contrast to Russia, Saudi Arabia has an extremely dry and arid climate year-round, and is facing some of the most imminent threats of climate change, including rapid desertification, and in the summer of 2019, the temperature in Al-Majma, a central city, reached up to 131 degrees Fahrenheit. Saudi Arabia is also home to Saudi Aramco, which according to Bloomberg is the most profitable company in the world, and between 1992 and 2017 released over 40 billion metric tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Saudi Aramco has taken in over $350 billion in revenue and is monitored heavy by the Saudi royal family, which in turn rules Saudi Arabia as an absolute monarchy. For countries such as Russia and Saudi Arabia, the issue of not being able to adapt comes in part from their dictator-like governments, as well as the country's heavy reliance on fossil fuels for their economies. Based solely on history, most of the economy is based around the mining of these natural resources, making it extremely difficult to change on a whim, particularly if the leaders of these nations are making extreme profits off of it. Overall, the worldwide fight against climate change has only just begun. Convincing larger nations, including the US, Russia, and China, to begin to really curb their emissions is a challenge that is undeniably difficult, particularly as China and America together account for roughly 40% of worldwide emissions. However, in the past decade, we have seen an enormous turnaround from a great number of nations in their recognition that climate change is the largest existential threat facing humanity today. The mere fact that 195 out of all countries on Earth made the effort to sign the 2016 Paris Agreement is an undeniably large step in our worldwide fight against climate change. I believe that looking to nations such as Morocco and certain EU states provides valuable insight into just how plausible it is to turn our world around. It is not yet too late to make these changes, and if some nations can do it, there is no reason why the rest of the world cannot make these adaptations as well.